Good morning. I am going to make some bagels today. These bagels are what Mike lives on for breakfast every day. We used to buy bagels at Safeway and we started baking them ourselves, and Mike prefers the ones I make to the store-bought, so I now make him a big batch of bagels every week to 2 weeks, and he freezes them and eats them slowly. So this is the bagel we're going to make. We're going to go through a dough making process, then they'll rise. We will knead them and shape them at that point. And then once we've shaped them, we'll take you over to the stove and boil them and put a topping on them. His favorite is sesame seeds, so that's what we'll be using today. And then we will bake them and you'll see the final result. So let's get started. We're going to first of all proof our yeast. And for the proofing of the yeast, I've already added 2 cups of warm water to the bowl here. The recipe I have says 110 to 120, no more than 110 I'd say. And the way you can test this is it has to feel very warm on your arm, kind of like a baby's bottle for those of you who have children. And so with that, we need to add a teaspoon, which I have put aside a teaspoon here. Here we go, a teaspoon. And I've got these lovely spoons recommended by a friend of mine. We can link to these in the description. But these have both Braille on them and they have large print on them. They're very nice and easy to use. And they come with a holder that's really easy to slot them on and off the holder so that I don't have to carry the entire rack of spoons with me every time. And they have a very, very nicely flush top so that all I have to do is just run my finger across the top and I have precisely what I need, which is a teaspoon. It also comes with a scraper, but I don't use that. I just use my finger. But it does come with the an implement to level them off. And this set of spoons goes from 1/64 of an ounce, or teaspoon, sorry, which is which I use in cheese making, all the way up to a 2 tablespoon measure, which is this one right here. We're going to use that one in a little bit. So I've now put the sugar in here, and it's just a teaspoon of sugar. And as long as I grab the right spoon from my counter, I'm now going to use 5 teaspoons of yeast. And I happen to know that a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So I'm actually going to use 2 teaspoons of, actually no, my tablespoon is dirty. So I am just going to use 5 teaspoons of yeast. But you could use a tablespoon and 2 teaspoons. So that's 2, 3, and I'm just leveling off the spoon in the jar. 4 and 5. And just shake that in. This is a standard dry yeast. I believe this is rapid yeast. I don't remember really because we bought this at Costco in a large counter quantity and just keep it in the jar. And now I'm just going to stir it up a little bit to make sure everything gets wet, and we'll be back in 5 minutes to do the next step. All right, so it's been a little longer than 5 minutes. I think my water might have been a little cool because I let it sit in the bowl a little longer than I should have before I added the yeast, but we have a bit of a foam on this here. And now we can continue with the rest of the recipe. So I have already measured out 2 tablespoons of oil, and that goes directly into our yeasty water mixture. I'm going to start adding my flour now. This recipe calls for 6 cups of flour total. I am going to put in the first 2 cups only. Leveling it off with my hand here. 1 and 2. And I am just going to splash that around a bit in the water. And now I'm going to turn on my mixer. I've used this mixer in another video. If you want to know more about my mixer, please check out my pizza video. And now that that flour is mixing in nicely, I'm going to measure in 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. So the sugar we put in before was white sugar, just regular, you know, white cane sugar. I'm now going to put in brown sugar, and the reason we didn't put the brown sugar into the yeasty mixture is because the brown sugar is for flavor, whereas the sugar we put in the water is to feed the yeast. So I have 2 tablespoons using my same new spoon set here, and I'm just letting that mix in. And I'm going to add 2 more cups of flour. And I'm going to do that while the machine is running. 1. Normally a lot of these bread recipes like this would use weight. This one uses measures. 2. There we go. And again, I'm just going to move my dough hook back and forth a little bit to let it mix up. And my dough here is already getting very much to be a together mixture, so it's time for the salt now. Just grab my salt cellar here, and I have the 1 tablespoon measure. Just flattening it out, and that's all I need is 1 tablespoon, and it goes. Now, for a while now, I've been practicing not putting the salt in directly with the yeast. And just recently I saw a YouTube video that said that's a myth. But I figured I won't take any chances. It's been working for me, so I'm just going to keep doing it this way. So my dough is very muddy right now. The salt mixture is being incorporated in. This is just moving around on the dough hook very nicely. And I'm going to add my last 2 cups of flour. I think I'm going to add these slowly though. So I'm going to pour part of this cup in, not all of it. And I'm feeling the top of the dough. When it's a little damper, a little less floury, I'll add some more as it starts to get sticky. And there it is, it's starting to get sticky, so I just dump the rest of it in there. And we're just letting that incorporate. Move my dough hook around, forcing it to get the flour. So right now the flour is kind of piling up on the dough hook, so I'm just disrupting that pile of flour and pushing it in to where it can get incorporated into the... And the thing I like about this mixer is that I can actually get my hands in and feel what's going on. A sighted person can just see what's going on. I need to get my hands in and feel what's happening with my dough and see what stage we're at. And the dough is starting to get a little stickier, but there's still a lot of loose flour in here. So, just going to let that be. I'm going to clear off the back of the scraper. very soft dough right now, and bagel dough is not soft. So I'm now going to force the dough hook to be at the furthest point here. Okay, we're getting stickiness on the surface again, but it's still not got all the flour from the bowl. You want to make sure that all the flour is incorporated before you add more. I may have added that last cup a little too quickly, which is why it's taking longer to incorporate all the flour in our dough. Now there's some very sticky parts on the surface. There we go. There we go. It's starting to form a nice ball, and a very sticky one at that. My machine might be going a little too fast, so I just slowed it down to bare minimum right now. And it is unintuitive as it is. If the machine moves slower, sometimes the dough ball moves faster because it gives it a chance to adhere to the bottom slightly, and then that's what forces it to rotate. There we go. Now all our flour is being incorporated much better. Slow down the process. I'm going to take my scraper out now because nothing is catching on that scraper. Need to release the, there we go. So see the scraper is clean now. So now we're just letting the dough hook move the ball of dough. And where just a minute ago we had a lot of loose flour, most of that loose flour now has been incorporated into our dough ball. And our dough ball is getting a little stickier. And I'm just forcing it all together here so that the sticky parts can pick up that loose flour. There we go. European machine. They're very common there. Can't remember exactly which country of origin it is, but they tend to use these more than they use KitchenAid mixers there. There we go. Now we have a ball forming, and I'm just going to let it knead. You can do this by hand. You don't need a mixer to do this. The motion, if you're doing it by hand, is push down on the part of the dough closest to you with the heel of your hand, and then fold it over and push back again. So it's kind of like a push away from you with the heels of your hand, and then fold over and press down with your fists, and push with the heels, and press, fold and press with your fists. So you see we're getting a very nice ball now. Very little that loose dough left, or loose flour left. So now I'm going to measure out my very last cup of flour. And I'm going to slowly add this. I'm only going to sprinkle it in a little bit at a time to give the ball a chance to incorporate it. So with one hand, I'm just making sure that what I put in the bowl is being picked up. Now I'm going to turn up the speed a little bit. just squeezing the ball to see if it's sticky enough to absorb the next little bit of dough. And this is not something that you can be fussy about clean hands. If you don't like your hands being covered with a little bit of goop, you should not be making any kinds of breads or doughs. So it's slowly absorbing the flour I put in. It's getting a little bit stickier, so I'm going to just put another pinch in. And it might seem that if I just put it in, it should all get absorbed, but this actually gets absorbed faster if I do it slowly. Instead of having large clumps of dry dough in the bottom of the bowl, well, dry flour, sorry, the sticky ball is forced to pick up the dry flour, and I'm squeezing the ball as well to help get that wet surface out and the flour be absorbed. Put a little bit more flour in there. Put my cup down for a second while I make sure that that all gets picked up. My dough came apart there a bit, that's okay. It'll all come back together again shortly. So you might hear the machine hissing a little bit. That's the sound of the flour dragging on the sides of the bowl. When that sound goes away is when it tells me that the dough is too wet and needs more flour. But I'm just going to stretch it out here to show you. This is already starting to form nice gluten. It's not fully done yet, but it's very stretchy and very gluteny already. And this is still pretty wet, so as I stretch it, I'm exposing that moist center to pick up all that loose flour. And I keep moving the arm back and forth here to try and get it at a point where it actually can push the ball of dough up against the side of the mixer a little bit more effectively. Normally the batch I do is much larger than this. I'm doing a single batch for you because I didn't think you wanted to sit here while I added 12 cups of flour. And that actually works better in this machine. This would have probably been better to do in a KitchenAid instead of this machine because the bowl is so large, it's not getting a chance to knead the smaller quantity of dough as much. But I like this machine, so I use this machine. This is what I call my bread machine. You know, I don't use those bread machines that, you know, add ingredients and 3 hours later you have bread. I tried one of those. I didn't like the taste of the bread that came out of those. No matter what the recipe I used was. Alright, so we're getting a little stickier now, but I want to keep kneading this. Look at that nice gluten forming. I just want to expose the center where it's still very moist. Because there's a lot of flour to be picked up left in there, and I still have half a cup. Bread is not a fast process, it is a really slow process. We are getting a very nice ball right now that's very tacky on the outside. Let's see if we speed it up here, if we can get the ball moving. Quite moving the ball yet. There it goes. Alright, I'm going to risk putting a little bit more flour in early here. Just about, 2 tablespoons worth. And that got absorbed really nicely. Very quickly, but you'll hear it still hissing. I'm going to toss in the rest of the flour now. And no more at this point. That is the last of it. So now this needs to knead for about 8 or 9 minutes independently, and I will come back and show you how that looks. Alright, we're halfway through the kneading process here. You'll see it's now one big ball. It's still a little lumpy. I'm still kind of pushing it down. I just wanted you to see what this phase was like. The dough is starting to be smooth in texture, but not smooth as a ball. We're just gonna let it continue now until the timer goes off, and I'll come back and show you that. All right, so that was kneading for about maybe 10 minutes. Wanted to make sure it all came together, and it is starting to come together a little bit. I actually want to finish this by hand a little bit because it is not really big enough for this bowl to work, or for this machine to work properly. So I'm just going to remove the arm here and remove my hook. So you'll see it's kind of coming apart a little bit, which is what made me think I should just do this by hand. Just gonna move the machine back here. I'm just gonna do this in the bowl. So again, pushing down with my back of my hand and pushing in with my fist. Folding up the heel of my hand and pushing down with my fist. Heel of my hand to push away from me and pull back towards me with my fist. Let's see, this counter is clean enough. I can actually show you on the counter. It'd probably be easier. So there's my dough ball. And I'm just gonna fold it in and knead with my fists, thumbs out, and then push away with the heels of my hand. Fold it back towards me, push down, and heels of my hands, and fold and heels with my hands. And it's kind of a rolling motion, you see. And I'm just gonna rotate 90 degrees because it's starting to elongate. And I want to keep it in kind of a ball. That's working much better with my hands. There we go. So now it's becoming more even. As I pull it apart, it's not crumbling or tearing. We're going to just keep working it for a little bit longer. So there's little tiny parts of this that feel crummy or crumbly, and I'm trying to get rid of those. You want a crumb when you've got baked bread. You don't want a crumb when it's dough. That's better. I'm just feeling all over, rolling it on the counter a bit. There we go. Now we have a nice ball. What I'm going to do is toss this bowl into an oiled bowl, and this is going to proof for 2 hours, and we'll come back. I just realized I want to show you the size of the ball compared to the bowl, because you're going to see how much bigger this is when we're done. So for the blind people, I have a bowl that if I touch my fingers together, my wrists are right across. So basically it's wrist to wrist across the bowl. I'd say it's about 1 foot diameter at the top. It's a very steep-sided bowl, and the ball fills just under half of it. It would fill half of it if it reached out to the sides completely, but it doesn't. So I'd say it's about 1/3 of the bowl full. And I promise you when we come back, this bowl will be very full. See you then. And we're back with our risen dough. It's been just 2 hours now, and you'll see that the dough now is taking about 3/4 of the bowl. It hasn't filled the bowl all the way up to the edges, but it's risen really nicely, and it's got a nice big dome in the center, and it is just about double, if not a little over double, what it was before. So immediately what I'm going to do now is squish it down, and it's a very thick, solid dough. And what I'm going to do is just take the sticky part that was on the bowl and just knead it up a little bit. And I'm going to put my dough aside here, my dough bowl out of the way. And we are going to use our scale and weigh each of our bagels so that we get good baking and even weight. So I'm just going to put that on the scale, a dough ball.
100
going to go for ounces on this case.
6.0 ounces.
So that's too large. We're going for a 4.5 ounce bagel. There we go.
5.1 ounces.
Take the same amount off again. I'm just literally pulling off of the ball.
0.0 ounce. 4.2 ounces.
Okay, we want 4.5. Just adding a little bit more there.
4.4 ounces.
And that's close enough to 4.5, so we're going to stop there. And what I discovered while I was off camera
0.0 ounce. Goodbye.
is that this is a higher protein flour that I'm using, which is why the dough is much drier than I was expecting it to be. And I can feel that the dough is very dry now. So the proportions that I used there would have been fine if I'd used just regular all-purpose flour. What I was using was a high protein bread flour, even higher than just bread flour. So it takes a lot more water to get the consistency of the dough that I was looking at, which is why at 5 cups it was pretty dry and having a hard time absorbing the water. So what I do is I take the dough ball, and I've done one already there.
Hello.
Well, I was talking and forgot to describe. So I'm going to take my dough ball, weigh a second one, put it on the scale.
4.6 ounces.
And that's close enough, 4.6 ounces.
Goodbye.
So now I'm going to roll it into a tight little ball in my hand. And when it's a perfect little ball in my hands, I'm going to put it on the cutting board and roll it around a little bit. This is really dry today. I'm going to just take my thumbs and go into the middle, poke a hole, and I'm literally just going around the edges and making sure that the donut-y part of the bagel is evenly thick. And I just kind of like stick it over 3 fingers of one hand and roll it up and down those fingers with the palm of the other hand. And then I put them on my cookie sheet. We'll do one more for you, and then I'll go off camera and do the rest. Forgot to turn on the scale first.
Hello. It's ready.
Put our ball there.
3.5 ounces.
All right, we need another ounce or so.
4.3 ounces.
I'm going to try and grab 2 ounces with
4.3 ounces.
little tiny crumbs at a time now.
4.3 ounces.
Didn't even make enough, so let's try that. So what I grabbed was about, 1 knuckle's worth of dough.
4.6 ounces.
And again, that's close enough now, so I'm going to start rolling this into a ball.
0.0 ounce.
Turn off my scale. And I'm squeezing while rolling into a ball. Just squeezing it up really tight. Your dough, if you used enough moisture, should stick to your hands a little bit. This is not sticking to my hands at all, so this is a very dry dough, but that's okay. And we're just making a nice even donut by making the ball, and then I stuck my fingers through and I'm rolling it up and down. So there's 3 bagels. I'm going to come back and we should have approximately 12 when we're done. Alrighty, so here I have all my bagels formed. They're not the most professional looking bagels, but they're all round and really plump. They've got a hole that's about 2 fingers width across them. I'm now going to cover them up for 30 minutes. And in 30 minutes, we will move over to the stove and boil these bagels. Because this is a boiled bagel recipe. Some recipes you can just bake. For them to be more authentic, you have to boil them. I'll see you in 30 minutes. All right, here we are for the second to last phase. Here are my bagels that have all risen up. Remember how I said before there was a giant hole in the middle of them that was about 2 fingers apart? Now I can't get one finger in them and reach the bottom of the pan. They have doubled in size. I'm just going to move this pan aside to the right-hand side of my stove here. And we are going to boil up our bagels. You see I have a pot of boiling water here. And this pot of boiling water has about 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup of honey in it. And here I have my cheat. My cheat is a basket that I use with my Instapot for pulling out the bones. I'm going to use this basket to deliver the bagels in and out of the boiling water because I found that when I tried to use a spatula, I couldn't flip them properly. So this is the method I found to make sure that I can actually get the bagels in and out of the water safely without tearing them apart. So I just put it in the basket and I drop it in the boiling water, let it cook for about 30 to 40 seconds in the boiling water. And I'm just counting in my head. Okay, and now I'm going to lift it out and I'm going to flip it over. I normally use a deeper pot when I do this so that I can flip it over out of the water or in the water. But I wanted you to be able to see them in the water, so I used a shallower pot. There we go. So I just flipped it over by hand really quickly. Now we'll dump it back in the water again. Waiting another 30 to 40 seconds. And what this does is it gives that really shiny, gooey crust on the bagel. That's why there's honey in the water as well. Okay, that's been long enough. I'm just going to pick it up, let it drain, and move it over here to my prepared pan for it. And I am literally just going to flip it out onto the pan from the basket. And I'm going to move this bagel to the corner of the pan there, and I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of toppings on this. Today the toppings we're using are sesame seeds and poppy seeds, and I'm just putting a little bit in my hand and sprinkling over top, a little bit more, sprinkling over top. The original recipe I had said to dip these in poppy seeds, but Mike said that made too many seeds on top and he didn't like that. So now that just sits there and waits, and we do bagel number 2. I'm just putting it in. I'm putting it top side down. It doesn't really matter, but I like doing top side down first. And these bagels puffed out really, really nicely. Okay, taking it out here, letting it drip, moving it over to cool it a little bit while I flip it over. There we go. Back into the water so that the other side can cook. And you know, if you feel confident that you can get a large spatula underneath these and pick them up, that is the best way to do this. But for me, this basket is the way that I can always control where the bagel is at all times, and I'm not cutting it in half, which is what I did when I tried using a spatula. And again, if I was using a deeper pot, I would literally just flip it over while it was in the water, because it's deep enough that I could just push down on one side and it would flip. But we're doing this for the viewing audience, so voila, we have our bagel. And I just take my pot and flip it out into the pan. And I'm going to put the poppy seeds on it again. This time I think I'll put sesame seeds on it. And just a tiny little sprinkle of sesame seeds. You do it while it's still wet so that they can glue to the bagel. There we go. All right, I'm gonna go offline so you don't watch me doing all 13 bagels, and we'll come back and put them in the oven. All right, so here we have 6 of my bagels on a tray. I've made sure to have them a little bit more separated when I bake them because they will come up a little bit and we don't want them to bake together. And I'm just gonna put some seeds on the last one. I've been doing combination for the last 2 here. So there's some poppy, there's some sesame. You can put dehydrated onion flake, garlic flake. You can put anything you really want as a topping. Whatever you think you'd like it as a topping, you can put it on. You just have to put them on while they're still damp. And we're now going to put these in the oven, and I'll come back and show you what they look like when they're cooked. Okay, so I'm going to just check my bagels right now. Open the oven door here, pull the rack out. I'm going to just, they're nice and crisp and delicious. I just tap them with my nail. And here we have one tray. I'm going to grab the second tray. And I'm just going to scoot these off of the first tray with my hand. Pile them up on the tray here. Changing hands because it's getting really hot. There we go. All right, so here we have the dozen bagels, and I've cut one open for you so you can see the interior. It's nice and steamy. It's a beautiful solid crumb. You normally would wait a little bit for these to cool. I'm just gonna take a bite for you. Incredibly crisp, quite delicious and chewy. I hope you make this. These are really, really good store-bought bagels. Don't have a thing on these. Thanks for watching. Please click subscribe and like this video, and let me know what you want me to cook for you next.